Hi there. How's everyone doing today? Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carolyn Hymas, and I am the Associate Director of Alumnics and Family Engagement at CalArts. And today we have a great talk for you, 8 steps for setting up a creative business with Michelle Roshanzamir. Michelle is fantastic. She's a grad of the theater school, as well as a grad of the MBA program at Cal State Long Beach, and she is also the founder of MVR Creative, a business entity that she set up to help folks set up their creative enterprises. And she's here to facilitate our talk today. So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us. Just one quick housekeeping item for everyone who is tuning in. If you could please send your questions through the Q&A feature. That's where we will be moderating all of your inquiries. Without further ado, I would love to just pass it over to Michelle to go ahead and get us started.
Hey, so my name is, as Carolyn said, my name is Michelle Roshanzamir. I'm an alumni of CalArts. I was in the theater program in 2009 and graduated from Cal State Long Beach in 2016. Wow, time flies. So the germ of what I do, or at least generally what I do, is I help leaders and creatives to bring their ideas to life and develop their businesses. This typically takes the shape of everything from strategy to figuring out the monies and funding side of things and grant writing to coordination, management, and producing. The germ for for so much of what I'm doing now actually started when I was a student at CalArts. I was very much of like, I got the creative and management side down. I don't really need any of this business side, whatever, it's fine. But it was just as much knowing that given where some of my interests lie as an undergrad, I knew I wanted to go to grad school. Best advice I got from a grad student at CalArts was take at least a year off. That turned into several. And I ended up going to Cal State Long Beach. Initially, when I started there, I was in the dual MBA MFA theater management program. I'm like, great, I literally best of both worlds. I got the business side, art side. Um, and if I don't strictly stay in theater, it's totally fine. The skills translate. With about one semester left in that dual program, I decided to drop the MFA and just focus on the MBA side of it. It wasn't an easy decision to make at the time, but I'm very happy I did. But between what I was learning in school to a lot of the work I was doing outside of school, I kept seeing a similar pattern of creatives especially, but people, but also just as much the managers and leaders at creative companies to nonprofits, very much in like the arts, culture, entertainment space, had the idea but needed help with the actual like, hey, how do I make this happen? And that was very much a lot of what I was starting to do. And I'd also started producing a little bit more pre-pandemic, and I get and in the latter part of 2019, I decided to stop doing the whole random gig work to what, I'm actually going to invest in myself, and started my own company in the second half of 2019. Um, and it's I got a chance to work with some amazing people to it's just as much literally like developing things like the mission and vision for a company to, hey, I want to do, like, it's just as much, I'm like one group of people I'm working with now is they're looking to do a bunch of like speeches and talks around like around the state and around the US. So it's just as much of like, okay, what's the strategy behind that? What do we need to do? And it's a lot of fun. I really like it. And have a couple small things that producing wise in the works now, and super excited now that everything's starting to open up and we can go do things and see things again. But while I'm sure I can keep talking, it would be great to kind of get going, and why we're all here today. So, okay, so things to kind of figure out. I always like doing something like this in the beginning just to kind of have a sense of what to keep an eye out for. Includes everything from like making a plan to get like knowing your why, your mission, all of that side of it, to figuring out who you're serving and what you're offering, to naming it, the legal side of it, having some systems in place, to having things like a bank account and having some branding and marketing in place. While these are kind of like the things I recommend you guys keep an eye out for, they're all kind of, for the most part, are going to be structured in the setting up of a plan or how to make a plan, because aspects of it all kind of feed into each other. So on the basic level, what's a business plan? It's something that has gotten thrown around more than once. And they each look at what you want to do with a business or with a company. They just have a slightly different approach to doing it. Before I knew even how either of them kind of functioned, it was definitely something that me, even when I was doing a lot more creative work, or at least more the traditional creative work, I was like, oh, like whatever, why do I need it? But I'm sure we've all heard a lot of things behind that of like they're varied. But with that, a business plan covers the who and the what of the business. And it's looking at things like like the operations, like the systems that you have in place, to what you're offering, to um, things who's involved, what are like the basic mechanics that you like, what are you doing and how are you planning to make that happen. It's typically seen in like a shorter term window, whereas a strategic business plan typically takes a longer approach to planning for a company. You're looking at the how and the when, and you're at minimum you're looking at like at least 3 to 5 years in the future. Some of them you'll get like 5 to 10 year plans. But it's looking at like the overall goals and how you're planning to get there, versus the short term that the business plans typically cover. So with actually taking a look at what goes into making a plan, there are several components, and you're looking at um, things like how are you going to go make it a reality, to figuring out the short and the long term planning. And you want to look at things like um, and this also goes a little bit in terms of how you're actually like putting the plan together, whether it's a more formal written business plan or something that you're using just internally to help guide you for the next like 1 to 2 years, because it can just as much be like the internal side of it as it is you looking for, if you're looking to set up like a bigger thing, even whether it's a for-profit or non-for-profit, you might want to be looking for investors or other funding. And it's just as much you want to know it. Either way, it's going to be getting clear on what you're doing and what you're offering and the mechanics of how that's all going to work. Okay, so taking a deeper look into what's in a plan itself. You can have, listed here some of like the stuff that you typically see in creating like a more formal written plan. If it's more like a informal one that you're using internally just for yourself, it's just you're still going to be covering the basic things of like what's the company, what are you doing, what are you offering, taking a look at the marketing plan just as much as like a market analysis, which is looking at what are other people in that are doing similar or adjacent stuff to you doing, to how you're actually going to make it happen, to looking at things like the who's involved, like, and how are things organized, to who's involved, to the financial planning, which is just as much looking. We're going to go that into a little more later. I can very much go on a tangent, so it's having all of that in place to kind of have a sense of what you want to do and how you're going to make it a reality. So one of the first things that you see, or the first thing that you see in a formally written business plan, is an executive summary. It's basically an overview of what you're doing. It's the first thing that you see, but it's always written last, in part because you want to include stuff that you have that's included later. It's a summary. It's very much is a summary of what's in there, and it should also be very much tailored to what the specific purpose is. Like if you're looking for investors, you want to be able to have, like, there's certain things that you want to include with that versus if, you know, versus if you're not. Like it's just, you can, that's the brilliant thing of it. You can tailor it specifically to what you need. So with that, then one of the next things you see is the company description, which literally just starts off with like an overall, taking a step back. What's your company? What are you doing? What are your goals? And how is that all going to start to work? Just as much as you're going to look at marketing, but that's typically a little bit after. You want to kind of get a lay of the land of, like, what are you doing? You're going to include things like the name of the company, where it's located, to things like, this is like a great place to include things like the mission, vision, and value statements, to like, what are your short and long-term goals? How are you planning to get there? To like a brief history of like of the company, what you're doing, um, to what you're planning to offer. Like, are you going to be looking, like, are you going to do more like a services or products? And this kind of goes into what's included in the company description. Is you're going to look at things like, like when putting together things like your mission and vision statements, you want to include things like, mission statement, typically nitty gritty of it is, what do you do, who do you serve, and how do you serve them? All factors in, and you can, with that, you're going to be elaborating in it within the plan itself, to the vision of, what are you, like, what's the bigger picture? What are you inspiring for change? What are you solving for the greater good? And having all of this stuff will also in place will also help you with getting clear on who you're serving and how you're going to communicate to them. So with naming your company, you want to, it's going to be one of the first things that people encounter when when someone comes across you. um, you want to have something that's distinctive, memorable, that will also make sense to the people that you're trying to serve. Which things like audience, customers typically can kind of be interchangeable. You do also want to do a little bit of research here. This is going to go into the legal side of things, but you do want to check if the business state the business name is available in the state that you're in. I know that typically each Secretary of State website, I'm based in California, so I'll be going through the California Secretary of State website. And there's literally a feature in there that you can just literally see if the business name is already taken, which is great because you don't want to have it's a layer of stuff you don't need with having two companies. I don't even know if you can have two companies in the same state that have the same name. But that would also be something to double check with a legal representative, because I may be a lot of things, but I'm not a lawyer. But with taking a look at the making it legal side of developing your stuff for your business, I like there's a couple of reasons why you want to do this. It's going to do everything from give you credibility. You're going to have a distinct legal entity, and it's going to offer you things like personal protection for your stuff. But the only caveat is, if you're going to be a solopreneur, that can get a little muddled. You want, like, with having a legally set up entity, you can have business bank accounts set up. You can get loan or grants, but that's also going to be dependent on the type of business you have set up. Like nonprofits can go for grants. For-profits typically can go out for things like a loan. Though there are, depending on what you're doing, there are things like fiscal sponsors that can kind of help a for-profit thing bypass the need for a nonprofit. And supplier arrangements can be definitely a perk. That's, if you're going to offer a thing, like a product that you're making, you can get things like wholesale pricing, you can get discounts, you can get things at a better rate that wouldn't necessarily be available if you were just, Joe Schmo running around on the street. It's also making sure to do your research with the different types of business structures out there, because there are more than one available. Here's a list of some of them that are. I'm pretty sure that there are more, but you have everything from a sole proprietorship to partnerships, which is typically between two people. It typically shows up that it's a limited partnership or limited liability partnership. They each kind of are tailored depending on what you need. Um, and with that, there is limited liability company, which is a common one that you would um, see. Taking a step back for a second, the common ones that you would normally see by way of business structures: sole proprietorship, LLC, or a limited liability company. B Corps have been popping up a lot more. And you also have things like nonprofits. There are pros and cons to each. Um, and something like a sole proprietorship is like the more technical um, term for it, but it's in many ways it's great because it gives you complete control of everything, but it's something that you're automatically considered as having one if you're kind of doing business related stuff but don't have anything formally set up. Basically, you don't have a separate business entity. It's a good for low risk low risk things if you want to kind of test out what you're doing before formally going for it. One of the cons to kind of note here is that you don't have the separation of personal assets versus business assets. So that pretty much means that anything business related and any of your personal stuff, like anything from like your car, your computer, any of your personal stuff, it's all under one lump umbrella, which it depends on what you're looking for by way of having a sole proprietorship. Partnerships are super simple structure with at least with two people. um, LLCs will give you it gives you the benefits of a corporation and a partnership business structures. And one of the great things about this is that it protects your personal liability or personal stuff in most cases, things like your vehicle, your house, your savings accounts, and it won't be at risk in case your LLC faces something like bankruptcy or a lawsuit. Well, there's a couple of different types of corporations, or corp for short. One that I've kind of have been seeing popping up a bit more is B Corps. They're still traditional business or like a for-profit business, but they're driven by mission and profit. It's like that hybrid of both. Nonprofits is, typically you're going to see them from everywhere, from charities, education, some theater companies or arts companies are set up this way. There are benefits to doing this, with one of them being tax exempt status, meaning that they don't pay state or federal taxes on any of the profit or any of the money it makes. There are several different types of nonprofits. One of the most common ones are 501c3s. And just note that dealing with like the registering of a nonprofit, it can be a bit of a process. You do also have to file with the IRS to get the tax exemption, and which is a slightly different process than registering with the state. Once you kind of have a sense of the overall, like what you're going to be doing with the company, have a name, have registered it. Yeah, and once you've done that, you also want to make sure that you have a clear sense of your product and services in place, because you want to have a clear focus on what that is. Whether it is more like a product, or like a physical thing, versus services like consulting to photography, to literally, like, there's a range. You can also do a combination of both. It just depends on what you want to be doing. And you can start with something small and grow and kind of build up from there. Something I've done with some people I've worked with is, if it's starting with like that one small offer, or starting with like that first thing and getting out there and selling that, which again, I mentioned this later, but selling on the base level, money in exchange for a product or service, base level. So you want to have a clear sense of what that is. Getting feedback is going to be great. With kind of developing that, you also want to factor in what you're charging or what your rates are. have good details about what you're offering, focus, and you do want to factor in things like benefits for the people that are going to be buying it or getting it from you. You know, kind of focusing on that benefits thing. One thing, an example that I've kind of come to love recently is, you know, if you're gonna be selling things like something like an Advil or a painkiller for a headache, you're gonna focus on, oh, let me help you with your headache, versus like, oh, are you dehydrated? It's just as much understanding what your thing is gonna have as a benefit to the person. You know, with looking at also with looking at products and services, you're gonna want to look at net revenue, which is a super fancy way to see the difference between the cost of making the thing or offering the service and the actual sales of it. There's a lot of other fancy words um, around that, from, you know, in terms of like, it's all financing and accounting words, but it's all looking at different things like how much everything costs to how much you're making and beyond that. So once you also have your everything from your um, name to legalizing it to knowing what you're offering and how that's all going to work, you want to look at the overall market, or do like a market analysis, which is another, again, jargony word to basically say what are you offering, not what are you offering, but how are you, what's going on in the, like, what are other people that are doing similar or the same stuff as you doing, to how are you going to market whatever you're offering. You want to see what the industry is like if you're going to be offering photography services, what does the rest of the um what does the rest of the photography industry looking like that now? Is it going to be changing? Same thing applies for art, for theater, across the board. Doesn't really matter what kind of industry or sector or métier you're in. It just, you want to have a sense of what else is going on. um, and you know, it's having like that overall sense to, it's just as much, who are you serving, who's your audience, who are your customers, how big is it, how small is it. The more detail you can provide, the better. And also there's a certain degree of what makes them unique, like why would they be coming to you for whatever you're offering. um, because with that you're going to be able to develop the strategy on how to market to them. You know, it's just as much, if you know that you're like, if your target person is, or customers are doctors, you're not going to go like market to mechanics. Like, it just doesn't quite add up. So it's having that understanding of who you're serving and getting clear on that, and the clearer you get, the better. This is also kind of where the intersection of what you're offering and who you're serving kind of comes into place. Because on the base, again, most basic level, sales is the exchange of money for a product or service. The clearer you are on what you're offering, whether again product or service, and who you're serving, is really important, because you're able to have more effective ways to reach them. You know, and some things that you want to consider when developing things like a marketing strategy is what makes them ready to what what makes them ready to want to work with you, to buy your product. How will whatever you're offering help them solve their problem, or why they came looking for you in the first place. To, on basic level, how are you going to reach them? Are you going to do things like a newsletter, social media, trade shows? Like, there's a range of options with that, which is great, because like there's just one narrow path. There are different options, and it's finding that right blend. Okay, so the next kind of thing that you want to take a look at is the operations strategy and how you're going to actually like implement it, which is pretty much another fancy way of saying what systems do you have and how do they all work, how are things going to run. And it's kind of expanding on more of the strategy with getting all of that done. Some of the things that you're going to see here, or some of the systems that you're going to typically see, are things like contract and terms of service, to how are you going to be tracking how money comes in and out, which goes into things like accounting and potentially finance as well. is it just you that's going to be working, or will you have other people working with you, or they're going to be employees now, or at some point in the future once things have grown? How are things going to actually like run, if you, by way of like, if you have if you have a product, from getting it from it created to the hands of the people that are to your customers, to if you're doing more of like a service, how are you offering it? How is that all going to work? How are things going to get delivered? How are people going to pay for it? So with that, there's going to be a couple things. Beauty of it is you also don't have to sit and figure it all out, um, all in one sitting. It kind of, you know, there's certain things that you want to have in place like early, but it's okay for things to kind of evolve and grow as appropriate. I've definitely seen that myself with, what I like when I was offering when I first started my own company to how I have things set up now, which is great because it's, part of it's based off of feedback I've gotten from people I've worked with. So one of the things that you do want to set up early are things like contracts in terms of service. There are some slight differences between the two, but it's just as much figuring out what's expected, especially on like the contract side of things, who owns what, especially if it's a service, because there are some copyright things that come into place here. What are things like deliverables, to figuring out things like return policy or refunds, to how do cancellations work. And it took me a while. It took me personally even some time to get in the habit of using things like a contract, but it's great because it's just as much, you're protecting yourself as much as the company and other people that you're working with. You want to just have that expectation set early so everybody that's involved knows what to expect. So once we kind of have started to look into things like the systems and how things are going to run, it's just as much how everything's organized and who else are you going to have involved. So with the company, you want to know how are things organized. Is it just you? Or if you're setting up a nonprofit, things like who's going to be on the board? Is it just you running everything, or will you have more people? Like, okay, looking at something like a nonprofit company, you're going to have things like the person that's running it. You're going to have things like the artistic director, but you will also likely have an executive director or managing director. Is there going to be anyone that's going to be on your marketing team, development team, anyone else? Or if it's just you right now, it's also just as much coming up with a plan of bringing those on board as you start to grow, with looking at things like the management structure and how things are organized. Within the more formalized written aspect of this, you're going to include things like information of who's involved, to bios, to list of any advisors or any other people that you're working with, which also kind of goes into how formalized of a plan that any of us are creating, and what the purpose of it is in the long term. Okay, so last kind of like chunk, financial planning and projections. This is gonna, especially with like a formalized written thing, this is gonna be one of the last things that you see aside from like any appendices. You wanna look at, like there's gonna be some typically standard stuff that you see within this section. It's gonna be the historical financial data, where things kind of stand now and where you want to take where you project things to go in the future. And there's going to be some common types of financial planning documents that you're going to see here. This includes things like income sheets, balance sheets, cash flow statements. If you're kind of doing a business plan for something that's been in existence for a little bit, you're going to have, that's especially where the historical stuff comes in. There's a handful of other like ratios and things that come into this. Thankfully, there are things like templates and other people to help with this, which is great, because it can be a lot to go through, but it's just, you basically want to have a sense of where things stand and where you think are going to go in the future, and how it all kind of works. Especially with looking at towards the future, you want to have a sense of when do you see when do you project things are going to make money. And what would that roughly look like? Because like if you're gonna look, like if you're preparing something like this to look for investors, they just want to. It's just as much when they're gonna make their money back as when you're gonna be making more of a steady income. So two more things that we're gonna kind of look at. With that, you're gonna want to have a separate bank account. This is also gonna help you with things like expenses. It'll help you with taxes, proving that it is not a hobby and an actual business, and several other things as well. You kind of get out of like the gray muddy waters of having all of your personal stuff and your business stuff all in one place. It is a headache. If you can avoid it, that would be wonderful. It's also going to be jumping back to some of the things around marketing, but you do want to invest in some branding. This is going to be like things like logos, fonts, color scheme. You want to have a cohesive look. You're going to use that from everything from like your website to stuff that you're putting out. It'll help you. It'll help like people that your customers and stuff and others recognize the company. Like even look at CalArts, they have very specific fonts that the school uses to some typical color schemes. I'm sure that there is a very long list of people that and companies that have done this very well. Um, but yeah, so it's just as much getting all of that in place. There's a handful of things to consider, but in the end of the day, it's everything from having a name, legalizing it, to knowing who you're serving, what you're offering, the why behind it, to having systems in place, to having things like a bank account and investing in things like branding. It's doing some of the things to help you get at a place where you're going to be more successful. And I'm here to help for anyone that needs it. But I would love to get to answering some questions. So Sunny asks, if you're a freelancer, do you think it's better to use your own name or making company name that would be the front for you? I've seen this go either way. I know that for myself, I purposely chose to not use my name when I set things up. There are some pros and cons to doing this. Like it depends on what you want to be doing, on the type of stuff that you want to be doing, and what your long-term plan is with it. It's literally just kind of depends on what your goals are. And if one of your long-term goals is to, like, say, set up a company, if you want to sell something down the road, it can be a little 50-50 with using your own name. A lawyer might be able to better help guide you with this than I can. It just, part of it also just literally depends on what your goals are and going from there. So I have several questions from Evan, but so for one of Evan's questions is setting up contracts on a budget. Do I need a lawyer? So, okay. So you basically, it seems like what you're asking is, if you want to have a contract, you need a lawyer to set that up. You don't necessarily need to, but so there are templates you can get and use to having a lawyer help you set one up. It depends on where you're at. I've gotten so she's a lawyer that's based in Tennessee, I believe, but has lawyers that she works with elsewhere in the States. Autumn Whit Boyd, it's a law firm that deals specifically with working with creatives. They have templates, I've used them, and that's also and it's a bit more of a reasonable price than working with a lawyer to set everything up. Depending on what you're doing, you may eventually want to have that eventually down the road talk to someone, but especially for earlier stages, like they have a range of different ones that I've used. They're great. So Evan also asks, can I start my business with very little money as it's all online, and can I make websites, or do you need to get funding? So you don't necessarily have to have funding to get started. If you can very much be bootstrapped, have limited funds, and eventually grow. That's also why you take the time to plan things out for your business and where you want to go. Like, even I started with like a very like small thing, and I slowly started to grow. That's one of the things I do with other people as well. And even and I primarily work online. So we've all kind of had to in the past year, but you don't have to go, you don't have to have a lot of money to get started either. Okay, so last question. So another question from Evan is, how do you do things like financial planning and projections if it's just starting out with no history? Start with where you're at, literally. You do want to, on the basic level, there are some templates available, but you do want to have a breakdown of what are your what are your expenses. This is going to be everything from websites to any other thing, like money that you're going to need to make your thing, sell your service. And so we were just sitting down and breaking things down for how much you're going to cost and starting to plan out how much you think whatever you're selling. Again, I don't know if you have a product or a specific service in mind, but like it's then also just as much mapping out the how much that's going to cost and going from there. Okay, I'm not sure who had asked this, but as a freelancer, should I have a separate bank account? You probably could have it in the same like this is like that weird kind of in between where I know on my end of having them separate, it's definitely been easier, but
all of the advice that we've heard from some of our other speakers who kind of specialize more in like finance and that kind of thing have said to keep the bank account separate. So that way for tax purposes, if you need to show like you're an actor and you need to show, the write-offs for your hair, your clothes, whatever it may be that you can write off for being an actor, you have all of those expenses in one account separate from your other expenses so they don't get commingled. So there's a more easily, I guess, traceable line of what you've done. So if you do happen to get audited, it's easier to manage at the end of the day. And ideally you won't get audited, but you won't get flagged to get audited. But yeah, so I would say keep them separate.
Yeah, good, great. Yeah, it makes your life potentially a hell of a lot easier. Okay. So how much does it normally cost to set up a very basic sole proprietorship for a fine art studio practice? I think it'd be a DBA and a business account. Okay, so sole proprietorships, typically there isn't any additional paperwork that needs to happen if you're just kind of starting out or at that doing a specific sole proprietorship. But then there is going to be some paperwork to do like the DBA and doing a business account. I know that the SBA, like the Small Business Bureau, I know that Caleb, I'm not sure if you're in California or if you're in a different state, but your state's SBA website will typically have all of those things to be able to do it online. It typically doesn't cost that much to set that up. Like once you have like the necessary like paperwork set up, setting up a business bank account is free. Like that doesn't cost anything. Some of like those costs will be with setting up a business, like with formally setting it up, and then there's going to be some other just stuff around things like taxes down the road. Let's see. How important are titles for a two-member LLC, 50-50 ownership, in which we more or less do the same things or jobs? Do our titles need to be different? Why or why not? Okay, so I know that when legally when filing some of the paperwork, some of them will ask you for things, but at the same time, I believe that there is like that option of like if you guys like co-CEOs, for example, I think they give you have like that option. But your titles don't necessarily have to be different, but it's also notating of like if there's more than one of you, if for example having the notation of like co-CEO or co-operations manager, or some sort of like delineation that they are kind of like the two are kind of separate. But at the same time, if you guys do see that some of what you're doing is a little different, you do want to kind of adjust as appropriate. This isn't exactly with like a two-member LLC, but something like a nonprofit, because it's starting to be an easy thing for me to explain right now, of like the like artistic director versus like the managing director, like one of them, like they both kind of handle like the bigger aspects of like the bigger picture stuff. One handles like the bigger overall vision versus the nittier grittier of like, okay, still working under that same mission, but like the nittier grittier. Yeah, it's just going from there. But no, you don't necessarily have to have two different names either. So Jessica asks, what about taxes? Any tips or general recommendations? Keep your business and personal stuff separate. It will save you and write everything down. There are, like there are some software that can help you with tracking things, which will also help when itemizing things for taxes. But part of it's just keeping things separate and getting a head start early, and also having a sense of what you can and can't write off. Am I missing anything?
Also just like to add, depending on like what type of business you set up, it's best to consult a tax professional, at least for the first few years, 2-3 years or whatever, that you are like running whatever your business is, just to make sure that you're getting a good sense of like how things should be filed. Because the slightest mistakes could end up costing you fines and penalties and fees. And once again, like you never want to be triggered for an audit. It's really grueling. So yeah, I would say find a good tax professional if you're just starting out. If you eventually want to try and tackle the taxes on your own, I would say learn the tax code. Figure out the tax code, and then maybe someday you can come do a talk for us on taxes. That's always a talk that we've done a couple of talks on taxes.
Words,
and
yeah.
It's always like a loved, hated topic. Nobody likes to do taxes. It's boring, it's arduous, it's very detail oriented, but it's something that we all have to deal with. So something for us to consider bringing back again for another talk.
Also, with that, like no shame in working with a bookkeeper to kind of like the month-to-month thing side of it. And like I've been working with an accountant for years. Like it'll help. It'll only help you down the road. And it's finding a good one that you also trust, that understands also the work that you're doing.
For sure. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming through. So Michelle, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today and for leading us through this conversation. I just really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your expertise with all of us and the community. So just once again, thank you all for spending a little bit of your afternoon with us. And Michelle, thank you.
Thank you. It's glad to be here.
Absolutely. Bye all.